Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, February 14th, 2024. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. This is the JupyterLab call. I'm Jason Weil, hosting today. We have a few items on the agenda. I will drop a link one more time into the chat room. Please add something if you would like to talk about it. I am first up on the agenda. There was a pull request that came in about an issue in JupyterLab that actually turned out to be fixed in JupyterLab server, not Jupyter server, but JupyterLab server. And so a gentleman who's based in Chennai, Vishnu Teep, who I don't believe is on the call, found the fix, merged it in. Very grateful for his contribution. The next question is, how do we do a release for JupyterLab server with JupyterLab depending on it? And do we backport these to older versions? What do people think about the process for that? Because I was not sure how that worked.
So we have a pin defined in JupyterLab, I believe, minimum version. And we certainly can release JupyterLab server independent of JupyterLab, as long as there is no breaking changes or any interface API changes.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
I haven't looked into that pull request, but looking very quickly, it seems that it's reasonably simple. So that would be a patch release, I guess.
It's a one-line change. Oddly enough, I was looking at it with a different one-line change, but it's a bug fix. It doesn't add a new feature. The most recent version of Lab Server was 2.25.2 on November 18th, so just under 3 months ago. So I'm not sure who has the privilege to kick off releases of that, but it seems like it would justify a patch release. I don't know if anything else
so
is
everyone in the release team can start this release, and if you would like, you can probably do that. I'm not sure if you are in the release team, but if you are not and would like to, I'm happy to help, and otherwise I can help with this release.
Okay.
But we would probably want to review the remaining 9 pull requests which were merged since the last release to make sure that it would be a patch release rather than a minor.
There are, so in addition to the one that we checked in yesterday, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 bot pull requests to update some pre-commit hooks and bump dependencies. And then Steven Sylvester, yeah, it looks like there are a few human-authored changes, but these are all like updating config or updating versions or updating dependencies that are bot originated.
Yeah, it looks like a patch release.
Yeah, I agree. I was testing with like just tip of main on my local PC and didn't notice anything appreciably different. So I don't know if I have release access. I can't remember unless I released anything in the JupyterLab org.
I think you should have access, yes.
Should?
Yeah, and you can check the GitHub teams and see if you are part of the release team.
Okay. And in terms of backporting, should we focus on backporting JupyterLab server issues? Does the 4.0 branch depend on a different version than 4.1? Or even like the 3x versions?
So 3x versions, yes, there are differences, but 4.0 and 4.1 are the same.
Okay. Okay. Actually, speaking of Lab 3x versus Lab 4x, brief announcement about that. I can drop this into the agenda as well. The proposal to change the end of life cycle for Lab 3 is now approved, and that's in the docs. I am working with the social media committee to get a blog post published and information circulated on our various social media. I did post something about it on Discourse. We will need to post this again when we get closer to the date. The nominal end of maintenance date for Lab 3 is May 15th, 2024, which is about 3 months from now. But because that's relatively soon, we will continue to consider patch releases for critical issues through the end of the year for Lab 3. But if you or anyone you know is still on Lab 3, this is an occasion to encourage them to upgrade to Lab 4 as soon as they can. Or if there are regressions or blockers that prevent that, we need to get that flagged, and we can discuss that at meetings like this one, especially as we get closer to that date. Any questions about that? Okay. I can't see the chat. Okay, so no responses there. I will add this link to the docs, and Mimit is up next.
Hey everyone, I just have a quick update on JupyterLab Desktop. I released a new version last week, version 410-1. This updates the bundled Python, bundled JupyterLab to 4.1.0. And in this version, now there is support for notifications and auto updating of the bundled Python environment installation. And also in this version, we are removing the web app, the announcements and the update notifications that are coming from the web application, which are shown at the bottom right, because JupyterLab Desktop handles these updates and notifications separately. Yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you for that. It will be very appreciated.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Users. And what is the status on the Windows certificate? Does it need?
Yeah, good question. I met with Arlis from NumFocus to get that rolling. We are still creating the certificate. The NumFocus needs to upload some documents to this the service, the Sentry, which is providing the certificate. So they're still we are still working on creating the signing certificates. So once the certificates are ready, I will integrate with the Windows installer.
Thank you very much. That sounds great.
Okay. Jeremy is next up on the agenda. There's a few items there.
Yeah, it's mostly to announce the release of Notebook 7.1, which is based on JupyterLab 4.1.1. So we were able to pick up some fixes that Mike put in this release. So that was nice. So it's out there. Maybe not all of the new features in JupyterLab will be working as expected in Notebook, but we can always fix them later. For example, the plugin manager is there, but it's maybe not like super nicely integrated. And there is also support for Jupyter AI would be nice to have, but I think we require a change in Jupyter AI itself. For example, to get the inline completion support. But yeah, if you want to give it a try, I posted a link to a binder, and then yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, I think there's an open issue in Jupyter AI about adding more functionality to the notebook, right? I think you opened that.
Yeah, I did.
Thank you.
I mean, I think one of the killer features would be just this inline completion, because you could just say to someone who still using the classic notebook that if they are using notebook 7 instead, they get something like GitHub Copilot in their notebook, and that is something that everybody wants nowadays, right? But maybe I will have a look at some point soon, so that we can maybe have Jupyter AI work in like in degraded mode, like just enabling some features if they are available. Otherwise,
Yeah,
do nothing.
I prefer simplified to degraded, but we can certainly add the
Simplified,
key
yeah.
functionality.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, without requiring, I think this issue also discusses how the chat should work, even though it might just work. Actually, it should be possible to open the chat, for example, on the left side. But even if it like most of the features of Jupyter AI don't work, and it's only this inline completion that works, it's already a good step. So yeah, maybe that's some follow-up items that could be done at the same time. Like you don't need to block on that for sure.
There was also an issue that came in about Jupyter AI where people wanted the learn and ask functionality for asking augmented questions outside of the chat UI, which would make it work in Notebook, but also in third-party apps like Colab and Visual Studio Code, which would be really cool. And I can only speak for myself. I don't have time to work on this, but if anyone would like to contribute to it, we would love to consider pull requests about that. We've been really fortunate to have such passionate people in the community offering suggestions and even pull requests for Jupyter AI, especially with that completion stuff. That's been awesome. Thanks, Mike, for helping out. David Q, one of my teammates who is not on this call, has been really great at like managing Jupyter AI's inbound issues and pull requests, and he's continuing to do that.
Yeah, thank you for reviewing and accepting my pull requests.
It's awesome. We're so glad that people are contributing such big new features to it. All right. Anything else, Jeremy?
No, that's it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy. Mike, you are up next with the infamous struggle about international keyboard shortcuts.
Yeah, but it got worse as we released 4.1 and included 2 pull requests, which broke experience for macOS users. So one was the inline completer that we just talked about, and it uses the same shortcuts as the Copilot, but well, so we achieved feature parity, but we also achieved bug parity, because the same bugs of users unable to type certain characters when they have Copilot installed are now also affecting JupyterLab. That especially, I believe, affects Italian keyboard. So one of the mitigations, because the other pull request was just adding lots of Control-Shift number shortcuts. So we disabled that in 4.1.1 for macOS users, but we do not have and cannot have the detailed information about the keyboard layout, because that's hidden by browsers. So only Chrome allows access, and other Chrome-based browsers allow access to the keyboard layout information. Firefox doesn't implement that at all, and other browsers, depending on whether it's in secure mode, so HTTPS, etc., might or might not allow you to see what is the actual hardware layout, and that forced us to do some workarounds. And there was another separate issue about widgets not being accessible, users not being able to type because the commands were taking over the input for Shadow DOM. That was related to the accessibility improvements that we did when reworking how the commands are wired up and when the selectors kick in. So the pull request number 15774, which got 2 reviews from Nicola and Gabriel, thank you, is resolving the issue of input not being received by things which are put in outputs in Shadow DOM, and that's one part. But there is also a new pull request which is trying to address the more general issue of certain characters not being available when users type using different combos, and that is making use of a new event on before input, which was designed exactly for this purpose. But unfortunately, while it was designed to enable web developers to not to have to worry about the hardware keyboard layout, it was not connected, like it's independent of on key down or on key up. Like it happens immediately after on key down, but there's no direct connection between them. So it's kind of difficult to get that right. But by using a simple trick of just having a timeout of 10 milliseconds, in my experience, I found a way to solve almost all of these issues with a single pull request. But this really requires more user testing, and especially if you have a Mac with a different keyboard layout, or just are happy to try different combinations and interactions on this pull request, I would really appreciate that.
I actually asked around at my company to see if anybody has a non-US layout keyboard, because this isn't even necessarily a language thing, right? The UK uses a different keyboard than the US does. And couldn't find it, but like there are ways to simulate a different keyboard layout if you go into your OS's settings, but you know, I'm nearing the point where I would just go on eBay and buy a bunch of USB keyboards with different layouts. They're not that expensive, but it's just more annoying than anything else to have a big pile of them. But it's definitely been educational that even commands like the the hash mark or square brackets are have different typing. Like square brackets are unshifted on my US keyboard, but they require an option press on a Mac Italian keyboard.
Yeah, and I think it's the most difficult for the compact keyboards rather than like full-sized. You can have the additional keys bound to different combos, but if you are using a very compact keyboard layout, you just cannot have that many functions. And I think it's fair for us to assume that if this combination of keys leads to a user input, we should respect that, and they won't get this command bound. We just cannot accommodate everybody. If they decided to have a small compact keyboard, and the language unfortunately requires that, then they will have to go to settings and change that for something which suits them.
Yeah. About the best thing we can do is put key features on shortcuts that use a letter, because even Asian keyboards have A through Z on them typically. Then you can shift into a different language mode. But I was surprised to learn that on French keyboards, even numbers are shifted. Like if you want 3, you have to hit the shift key because the base character on that is different. I don't have a French keyboard in front of me. But numbers, we were using those with like modifier keys, and then we ran into a lot of problems with that. So the safest way seems to be using letter keys. with ideally like a command key, because on the Mac, option plus letter is used for alternate forms of letters. I asked around the last time we were talking about these, and I dropped a link into the chat because we have a tag keyboard that we use for these sorts of bugs that are specific to one keyboard layout or another. And there are 41 of them open at the moment.
Yeah, so the pull request 15790 will likely enable us to close many of them. Not immediately. Some of them will still need to be like, if something is bound to a code mirror shortcut, it will still need to be changed so that it's accessible using our shortcut customization panel. But it's still will be a great improvement. The only difficulty is whether it actually works good enough for most users. Because like I used 10 milliseconds timeout to decide whether a key will be generated based on the sequence of events. And I have pretty good computer, and I can reasonably assume that it will work on similar configurations. But I cannot guarantee that it will work for everybody. So I will actually add a reproducer that you could copy and paste. And if anyone has a few minutes and could just try to type into the input which shows up and see whether any commands are accidentally invoked, that would greatly help us with deciding whether to move forward with that pull request. Or we can just, you know, the worst case, if we cannot decide, we can release that and revert if it turns out that it breaks something. But I'd really rather have that tested before releasing.
Nick just shared a GitHub repo for keyboards. Is this like a simulator for different keyboard layouts? I've never seen this before.
It's an enormous pile of JSON that fully describes how all these keyboards work. It's usually paired with a it's for the serious keyboard nerds that make crazy crap, because they also manage firmware. But inside that JSON, there's a lot of stuff, and you know, theoretically, you ship that. I mean, as an extension, I think frankly, if you had something like this that understood a MIME type of, you know, application JSON plus via or whatever it is, that actually drew the keyboard on the screen, and then you could build your own damn one, and then we just knew where those were, that would probably go really far. I don't know if this has everything that we'd actually need.
Yeah. A couple of comments about that.
It handles the different lighting stuff. Ooh, I want to, when my debugger goes red, I want my whole keyboard to go apeshit. That sounds great.
Sure. Nick, your audio input is quite noisy, but I did catch most of that. I hope everyone else did as well. One thing I was thinking was potentially having kind of preset keyboard schemes for the settings editor. Maybe on like first launch, we could send you to that if your like browser language, which I believe you can detect in all browsers, is set to something other than US English. We can conclude like, hey, if you're using a non-US English keyboard, you might want to check that out. Maybe pop notification on first launch. You know, we don't want to be patronizing to people. We also don't want to be exclusionary to them. The other thing is, as Nick alluded to, it's currently kind of trendy to have small layout keyboards, things like 65% keyboards, 40% keyboards. keyboards with fewer than 100 keys. And obviously laptops are almost always like this unless you have a jumbo laptop. And we got a couple of bugs when Lab 4 came out that people who had reduced footprint keyboards, they have all the keys accessible. You just have to use chords of like function and special combo keys that don't have a scan code to do that. But people were now impeded from using certain shortcuts because they'd have to press like 6 keys at the same time. So we're not going to make all the people happy all the time, but it might be good. I can file an issue about like opening like a option for the settings editor on first launch.
So maybe you could add that as a comment to 7579. I've added a link to that. That was the other Jason has started that in
Jason Grout.
2019. Yes, yeah. And I think it's good to consolidate the discussion here.
Okay. Did you put that in the oh, I see it now.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a lot of links in the meeting minutes all of a sudden. Okay. Yeah, I can update that. I don't need to update anymore. I don't need to create any more issues if I don't have to. Awesome.
Okay. Do we have any other ideas on how to improve that? Okay, so I will move to my next point, which is distracting focus indicator, and that is a consequence of the improvements around the accessibility and keyboard navigation, which I'm very grateful for, because it's way nicer to operate with just keyboards in the notebooks and in JupyterLab in general. But especially for file browser, a number of users, and by a number I mean I think it's about 10 now, have complained often independently that the focus indicator around the file name doesn't, like, it's distracting. It behaves odd because when you focus on something else and something's grab focus as you hover over them, it disappears or it appears again. And for some users, it looks like it's an edit box to rename the file, and they are confused, like, I'm not renaming the file right now. And it's generally not very intuitive. So in this issue, which is 14678, I've recently put a number of proposals of how we could address that. I am not sure whether these are like ideal accessibility wise. For example, we might decide that we don't want to focus on the file name only, but instead like put the focus ring indicator around the entire item and handle checkboxes by having different interaction for space versus enter, which seems good to me, but I know that it might not necessarily comply with some of the best practice for accessibility. So I'd really appreciate the feedback here. And otherwise, I will open a pull request with one of these options and try to get that merged. But yeah, if you have opinions, look at the mockups and please leave a comment or just put a thumb up if you prefer one or the other. The other focus indicator issue is that because the cells now receive focus, we have the blue ring around them when they are in command mode. And that is nice, but it's kind of redundant with the collapser bar on the left, which doesn't indicate focus, it indicates the active cell. But some users found that it kind of gets you into a weird state when you think that you are doing something else with the cell than you are. And I suspect that we'll see more feedback like that coming in as users move to 4.1. Just letting you know that there is this conversation in issue 15793, which is originally titled very differently, because here user thought that our execution started working differently from 4.1, but all that was really causing that was just because of this focus indicator was distracting them, as it seems. Okay, moving on. Do you still want to publish joint blog post about JupyterLab 4.1 and Notebook 7.1? And if so, is there anyone who would like to work on that either collaboratively or asynchronously?
Last time, did you share a link to a Google Doc, right? I think.
Yep.
Okay, maybe we can continue there or somewhere else.
Okay, I'm sharing the link in the chat, but I've changed the setting so that everyone can edit, because I noted that default was to viewing only. So I will not include that in the notes just to avoid like getting too much spam. And I will also populate some details once I get time. I probably will be on the weekend. And my final issue, which I think we can move to the very end of our meeting or possibly in the unrecorded section, is JupyterLab 4.2 planning. I started drafting an issue to give an outline of what timeline we would like to have and possibly which features to include. And my suggestion would be to, rather than have it 6 months from the last release, to make it like to try to release that in 3 months from now. Other like any general thoughts or other ideas? Okay, so let's get back to that after Eric, who is now on the agenda, and we can walk backwards and set the provisional dates for when we make a first beta, when is the feature freeze, etc., and open an issue together.
All right, so I added a couple last minute items. First is I'm still trying to get the JupyterLab file browser to work with my hex editor extension. So I have local file editing working, and that just opens, it can open files on your laptop via the browser APIs, but I want to get it working with the JupyterLab file browser. So here is, oh, let's see, I'll just screen share. So here is JupyterLab desktop. Let me see here. So here's
Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you increase your font size so it shows up better on the recording?
Ooh, how do I do? Okay, zoom in. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is this is JupyterLab desktop, and this is just looking at a local file. What I would like to be able to do is to right click on something and open with hex editor. I haven't gotten it to work so far. I thought maybe I just ad hoc stick this onto the agenda. So this is kind of what I'm trying to do. Right now, the hex editor is a widget subclass. So as far as I understand, from what I was told, I need to be using let me see, where did it go? ABC Widget Factory. My understanding is that I need to make a new document widget factory and then have that construct my hex editor widget. So this thing apparently needs it needs a document widget and a model as the two abstract types there. So that's kind of the route that I'm trying to go, and this is based off of the documents example here. So it says the easiest way of creating a new widget factory is extend from ABC Widget Factory, overwrite, create new widget, which I have kind of tried to do here. So here is my widget class that I made originally. I am trying to wrap this in a document widget. And I am then trying to take that document widget and use that with this ABC Widget Factory. So I have then I've implemented this abstract method, create new widget. But yeah, I'm not sure that if I'm missing anything, if anyone has any suggestions here.
Okay, so we have the widget factory, and how do you register it?
So that is added down here. So this is here's the activate function for the extension. And down below here, I'm doing a new hex document factory, which is the ABC Widget Factory subclass. And then I'm doing app.registry add widget factory. So that's how that factory is being registered.
Yep, sounds good.
And this should, in theory, show up. If I implement this properly, it should show up in the open with menu, right?
So do you have file types assigned in the factory?
I have them. I've been editing this code. Let me see what I have here right now. So right now I'm passing that in here. I know there are other snippets elsewhere that I guess kind of specify the default for and the file types when you register. But that's kind of where I have that now. And I guess here I'm subclassing ABC Widget Factory, but I don't know, I've omitted the model class. So I don't know what to use. I was told that there's an existing model for this. This is the only thing that I could find that was related. So because ABC Widget Factory supposedly needs this model, I'm not sure what I need to be doing, because ABC Widget Factory is supposed to take an I model. But there's supposed to be an existing model I can use that will allow me to pull binary data, but I cannot find a model subclass that exists for that. I can find this, but this is not an iModel or like an implementation of iModel.
Have you tried changing the file types like to CSV or you have TXT? So TXT is rather controversial and should work with, like, if you open the context menu over a TXT file, does it work? Does it show up?
The error I was getting last time I tried some of these other common types was cannot. It told me in the console when I tried to run this, it was telling me cannot open file or something because the text can't be encoded as UTF-8. So I think, like, right now, my understanding is we have like text handling and then JSON handling for a lot of the models. And I was wondering if that would be one of the basic problems, is that we don't necessarily have one that is directly for binary data. I'm not sure if that actually makes sense or not. Yeah, so I think we have, I think, from string and from JSON. And I guess one of the, I mean, what I could do is read in as Latin 1. I could read it in as text encoded as Latin 1, but I'm not sure how to specify the codec. So I don't know if anyone has any suggestions there, or if that's even something I should be worrying about.
I can say that there are existing implementations, widget factories, which take binary data, and maybe it's worth looking at how they implement it.
So can you point me? So I know we have these factories, right? What I'm not understanding is, I guess I'm supposed to be passing in some kind of iModel implementation into this widget factory,
That's
right?
usually a model that you define, yeah.
Okay, so if I omit that, I guess do I need to make a subclass myself? Or that's kind of my question. I like, because we have these other factories, but we don't have iModel subclasses to my knowledge. So I'm wondering, I guess,
So
what
iModel
should I?
is an interface. So you
Yeah.
basically need to create a class of your own, which takes some value, and then take the value out of that class whenever you need that from the model.
Okay.
So my suspicion is that yes, you need a model, but
Yeah.
what that would be, that really depends on your use case.
Yeah.
It might be as simple as 10 lines of code, especially if that's a read-only file. It would take the value, store it on some attributes, and allow access to that attribute.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll look into just subclassing or like implementing. I'll do an implementation of iModel myself then. Thanks. And I guess the last item I had, and I'll drop a link to it in the chat, is so I just dropped that in the chat. There's a proposal here again. I mentioned this, I think, one of the last meetings. If anybody can comment on this, this is an idea for doing an office hours weekly, where people can get help from the community and core contributors can get help. The idea is to have an open office hours in the old notebook meeting. So I haven't seen a lot of feedback on here. So if anybody likes that idea of doing open office hours every week, just before the lab meeting, yeah, please drop comments in there. Yeah, I've been reading about desktop for some time, Mehmet. It's really nice. But yeah, that's all I've got. Check that proposal if anybody can drop any comments there. I'd appreciate some other voices there.
Very cool. All right, thanks everyone. The next thing on the agenda, somebody did not put their name, but they tagged a particular code review, 15782, as needs review. I think it's a good idea. We are about 8 minutes from the top of the hour, so we can't really do a proper like scan of all the pull requests. But I think it's a good idea to periodically take a look at the pull requests coming in. If you can help out, I just made a note to look at one that just came in about the documentation, to see if we can review, even to just give comments about open pull requests. So Mike opens 15782. Mike, did you want to share your screen or just talk about that one?
So that one is just
Go ahead.
a single line of code change, really. So
Is it really?
yeah, plus tests.
Oh, the
Like
tests are way longer than a
always,
line, but good. Thank you for
yeah.
adding them.
So just FYI, the test is duplicated because we have separate file for testing notebook in windowing mode and separate for testing it with defer mode. The plan is to reconcile that into a single file. It requires a change to the playwright configuration, and I'm not quite sure whether. No, I think it is going to be done without like a point release. It just would need to be in a separate pull request to avoid like conflating different issues together. So that's on my plan, on my to-do list. But for now, there is a pull request editing 3 files, even though there is a single line of code change.
All right, well, we are about 5 minutes until the top of the hour here. So does anybody else have any topics to talk about on the record? All right, I'm going to stop the recording then. Brace yourselves, everyone.